7:32, and I call this meeting of the Finance and Budget Committee together. We're going to go over some quick things and then discuss a couple of other things that have come up since we have this. All right. So first, there's a gift that the town has to accept for a van for At Home in Darien. The reason why, even though At Home in Darien is a separate charitable organization, the fact is that the town ends up owning the vehicles and does the insurance on it. Otherwise, they would not be able to operate. And then At Home in Darien reimburses the town for those expenses. As such, when there's a gift coming, the town has to accept it. So the gift is for $40,000. The van is estimated to cost $45,000, and At Home in Darien will be taking care of the difference. So I need somebody to move that. I have Doug, and I need a second. I'll take Bill Dunn. Is there any questions or discussion on that? Nope. Okay, so we're ready to vote. Everybody raise their hand. The person who's called in, can you identify yourself?
Yes, Jack, it's Charles. I'm in favor, obviously.
Okay, fine, thank you. Okay, that's fine. So that passes. Next is, we were not anticipating, at least initially, when the budget was done, that there was going to be any leases on Great Island. Turns out that one of the homes is in fact re-upping the lease that was scheduled to end at the end of July. The rent is $5,000 a month, so that's adding $60,000 to the fund, which is fine because the fund can carries balances from year to year. The provisions does state that the town will be doing work there, and they have to approve the noise, sound, and the inconvenience that might be going on there, such as during the week, there may not be certain passages in and out based upon the main road. So, I'm sorry, it's $5,500 per month, so it's $66,000. And notice is must provide 90 days if we're going to end the lease, and they only need, I believe, 30 days for their notice. Any questions on the lease? If you're asking me which of the homes it is, I have to honestly admit, I do not know. So that was asked earlier in the week, and I honestly didn't check out to see which one it is. So any questions on the lease? Are we ready to vote? I need somebody to move that. I have Beth for moving, and for the second, I'll take Charles P. Okay. Are we ready to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Okay. Let's go on to the next issue. Hold on. I'm going to mute.
I was having issues with my internet, so I'm not totally, I'm going to abstain.
Okay, fine.
Jack, I just looked up 49 Great Island. It's the house right beside the Great Mansion on Great Island.
Okay, sounds good.
That was
Yeah, I didn't think
affectionately
it-
known as, that was the Playhouse.
Yeah, that's the one I was thinking you were talking about.
Must be nice.
So it's not something that's right on top of the entryway, so that's fine.
No.
All right. So let's go on to a couple of other things. I got a call today that the Great Island Advisory Committee is making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen to buy 19 benches that cost about $2,000 each, and as many as 16 tables and chairs, more than 16 chairs, to be placed initially around the stable. Say the total amount is maybe 80,000 or so. And here's the slight dilemma. Typically, the RTM does not meet on July or August, and I don't see a bunch of excited faces to have a virtual meeting in July. If we didn't do something in July, it would postpone it to September. One of the other options we have, and I cleared this with Seth Morton, is that in speaking to the other chairs of the RTM committees, we all feel that any expenditure on Great Island that is not included in the original bond, which was for access, parking, or remediation, needs to come before the RTM for approval, regardless of what the dollar amount is. As such, and if not, this could easily just go to the Board of Selectmen, which will pass it simply because 3 of their members are on it, and then go to the Board of Finance, which is chaired by Jim Palin, and Jim Palin and another member of there are on it, so that's going to pass. And there's enough other outside funding sources that they could use to pay the $100,000 and exclude the RTM. We don't want the RTM to be excluded, and we don't want to set a precedent that they think that this is something that can be done in the future. So the concern that we have is, number one, and this will be addressed. They've been talking about the tables and the benches for a couple of months now. It wouldn't be that difficult to have put $100,000 in the budget and say it's for tables and chairs, and we just would have spent it. It would have cost just an extra mill rate increase. Not that, the mill rate wasn't large enough. But that being said, F&B can have a sense of the meeting on this, and potentially I'm still going to be in communications with Jen Chinesky to see if this is a must-have or whether or not they can wait to September. If they can wait to September, we won't do anything and handle it under the normal process. If they really want to go forward with this, I'll work with Wayne to create a resolution. The resolution would basically say the following. We are authorizing the purchase of 19 benches and 16 tables with surrounding chairs in the amount not to exceed $100,000, contingent upon the approval of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, to be taken from either the general fund or the reserve fund for non-recurring expenses contingency account. That would give them authorization to go forward. They'll probably be addressing this in sometime in July. So that would still have the RTM have its say if we approved it or we didn't, and go forward. So I'll take any and all comments on the situation with the understanding that we will be telling them this ain't the way it's supposed to go. And we want a process that truly outlines how funds, other than what's covered under the initial bond, are going to be handled in the past for the fund's accountability. At the same time, we're having this discussion. Amy Zebedakis at her committee meeting that's in room 206 has Monica there who's discussing this, and they will be addressing that on that meeting as well. So I'm open to any and all comments. Go ahead, Laura. You have to unmute yourself.
I feel like this purchase is not part of the grand plan. And once we decide on what we're going to do with all the different areas of the property, we may not need these items. I mean, benches are one thing, but why do we need tables with individual chairs? Why wouldn't it be just a picnic table with non-removable chairs? And why do we need this many of them? I know it's a huge piece of property, but it's like, I feel like you're putting in things as a Band-Aid, and then this $100,000 might be totally scrapped after everything gets developed.
Well, at least for the benches, I tend to believe that having benches around the walking paths and that makes a lot of sense. So I was also told that the initial concept is to have 8 tables purchased and see whether or not they're even being used.
Yeah.
And then if
I
they're
mean,
not
I
used,
did,
go from there.
for what it's worth, I attended the Great Island Advisory Committee meeting, and my understanding is the benches are supposed to go along the paths, and then the tables and chairs are for what I would call, let's say, an initial use of the space next to the stable. So the
Correct.
idea is the stable is in many ways sort of the natural congregation point anyway, when you come onto the island and hang a left. So, and they're talking about putting up like a pop-up cafe or maybe a food truck, and then having the food, the tables and chairs there so that people can make use of the island. So that struck me personally, having listened to the meeting, as okay, because it seems to me like under any circumstance, there's no discussion that the stable building would be removed or torn down or whatever, and it's probably going to be like one of the main congregation points on the island, so that it felt to me like it's sort of a no regret move. I mean, on the topic of Great Island more generally, like, and I'm not that close to it, but like I don't actually know how the governance is being handled, because like the whole notion of a Great Island Advisory Committee is advisory, but when I listened to the meeting with Reed Hildebrandt, etc., it sounded to me like it was a Great Island Decision Committee, and I had a little bit of a concern around that, yeah, and then it wasn't clear to me, other than the Great Island Advisory Committee / Great Island Decision Committee, does that roll up into the Board of Selectmen, or does it roll up into Parks and Recs or whatever? So my take on the meeting was like, I'm okay with this like as a tactical measure, because like I feel like as an RTM we spent a lot of money to buy the island, so we should make it available for people to sit there and have a cup of coffee and sit in tables and chairs next to the island. But it did raise questions in my mind as to the whole governance of how this is going to work going forward, because I don't think like we as an F&B committee, like we should, like every time they need tables and chairs, we should meet a meeting to talk about $25,000. Not that I'm not willing to do that, but I mean, there should actually be in my opinion, there should be an organization in the town that supervises the Great Island Advisory Committee that does this as a line job. That's just my own personal perspective.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of an answer, having spoken to John Zagrowski about that. The advisory committee reports to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So that's their chain of command, and I'm not going to say that they're not making decisions that aren't going to pass through the Board of Selectmen.
Yeah.
As I said jokingly when I was discussing this with Seth Morton, you have Monica and Mike Burke who sit on that committee, and you have
Exactly.
John Zagroski. So that's 3 out of the 5 right there. So anything that's
Exactly.
really coming out of that, they're
Yeah.
going to pass. And Sarah already has stated that she's not going to challenge what Great Island
Yeah.
is going to do. So
Yeah.
we know that the challenges are supposed to be done earlier on
Yeah.
in that committee to make it. But definitely any approval of funding in that has to go and be on the agenda for the Board
Yeah.
of Selectmen and that, which is, part of the unusual thing of that we would be doing this contingent upon approvals because we're a little bit ahead of them. And if it doesn't come forward, that's fine. If it ends up being able to be delayed to September, that's fine also. I just don't want when it goes through the Board of Selectmen and then just from a process perspective,
Yeah.
to get to the Board of Finance and they say, oh, the RTM isn't meeting, we need this
Yeah.
because there's 2 members there, and therefore we're going to do it without them.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, we're getting out a little ahead.
Yeah.
But I agree with you, Charles, and that's one of the things that we're going to be requesting on Monday is that before we approve the next thing, here's some things that we want to see done. And one of them is we want to understand what the policy is for approving expenditures. Number one, we want items that they're thinking of purchasing, not included in the existing bond, to be included in budget. I consider this to be an off cycle, which was approved, and the only one that it's qualifying for, since I participated in the creation of that, is the town administrator believes that this is something we should do. That by itself was a catch-all for emergencies. I don't perceive this to be an emergency.
No.
So there will be some, this time we're going to accommodate you. But there's some things, and from the beginning, Charles, I'm with you. I've been asking about what the governance is because I think that's so important.
Yeah, and I will say, for what it's worth, like the other impression I had from sitting through the Great Island Advisory Committee thing for 3 hours the other night is, it seems like the person from Reed Hildebrandt does about 50% of the talking, and aside from that, the thing that I didn't like listening to the meeting is they talk constantly in terms of possibilities. So they say things like, well, we're going to open up the walking path and we're going to make it available for dogs, but then over time, and they show you this picture that says, over time, we're going to there's going to be a wooden boardwalk here, and then they have all these white lines which turn out to be paths, and then the woman from Reed Hildebrandt says, oh, well, these are potential extensions. So the whole thing seems to me to be like highly incremental. What I'm saying is like they're saying, so they're talking in terms of all these short-term things they're going to do, and then all the things we could do in the future, as opposed to working back from a target state. So what I'd like to say, what I feel we would need to do is to say, what's the target state, the ratio of, ecologically protected versus used parts of the property, where do we want paths, where do we want not paths, etc. Because then they have an event, there's an event tent, which is a permanent event tent, whatever that is, which you're talking about setting up next to the
Mansion?
the mansion. Thank you. Yeah. And then they're talking about then there's multiple pavilions. There's a concert pavilion and a play pavilion and so it just seems to me like what the approach they're taking is like we're going to do an incremental step one, and they're preserving all this optionality of other things we can do. So it feels like a very open-end kind of thing. And what I would rather see is them to say, this is a target state. This is where we would like to be 3 years from now. It's going to require this amount of capital expenditure, this much money to tear down house A or B, whatever, right? And then, so basically you have like a long-term plan with a long-term budget associated with it. And it feels to me like it's just being driven by incrementalism with Reed Hildebrandt doing most of the talking. And that was and I don't know if other people shared that impression, but that was sort of my take listening to the meeting. And I walked away being a bit nervous by that. And then also, Jack, I think you had sent this email saying, like, wait a minute, like, what's the plan? What's it called? The open space plan, or whatever the term is for the green space plan for Darien as a town. So to my mind, you'd almost need to have that as like a target state. Like I'm saying, like, where do we want to be a couple of years from now, and then work backward from that. That was my take listening to the meeting, but I'd love other folks' opinions. I'm not
I'm
obviously the only
gonna
one
do
who was
that
there.
also. I just want to add one other thing. I've approached Monica and Mark out a letter, and I agree. I'm playing Monday morning quarterback, so I definitely am scoring a touchdown on this. But we hired Reed Hildebrandt to do the wrong job. What we should have hired them to do is to create an open space strategy. And open space has really two component parts. It's recreation and it's conservation.
Yes.
And under recreation, you have structured events, which is Board of Ed, Board of Selectmen, organized sports, rentals and other things, nature center that might be going on there. And then it's passive. So if you go to the beach, it's passive. If you're using a racquetball tennis court or a basketball court, those are all passive, providing nobody else is organizing it for you. Walking, and there's biking, all these other passive activities that go on there. When you go to the conservation side, interesting enough, architectural conservation is one, which actually fits in. Soil conservation, making sure that the local and native ecosystem is happening, animal life preservation, invasive species removal, waterways, establishing sustainability. And interesting enough, visitor management, which is part of the discussion that's going on at Cherry Lawn, that do we have too many visitors going there that's destroying an asset?
Mhm.
So those are things that I agree and said that, but again, we should have had Reed Hildebrandt expand on that, do that, and then take a look at Great Island and say, what does Great Island bring to the table? What
Yes.
gaps is it filling that we don't have? And what do we then want it to be in order to make things up? And unfortunately, there's a lot of things that they're proposing without having full knowledge of what other assets the town has.
Yeah.
Jenny Schwartz was on our committee and starting to work on that. She's now doing that for a separate project to just at first take an inventory of everything we have, working with the Park and Rec, the Board of Ed, and other organizations, but also take a look at open space for what does the land trust have that's open to the public,
Yes.
and other things along that. So I really agree with you. With that, I'm going to be quiet, and Beth, you had your hand to talk.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I know you forwarded us a couple of emails, but in addition, the number of people who've talked to me at Palmer's and while I was gardening in the community garden about their concerns about Great Island being developed too much and too fast and without everybody in town's input is actually very surprising to me. Like, it's clearly gotten traction quite quickly. And I want to make sure that we can proceed at a moderate pace and without, with the buy-in of the people in town. And if we need to be slow about even things like purchasing tables, frankly, I would prefer to be slow about it. Although I'm sure tables we can use anywhere and it'll be fine. But I think that we should definitely have a say in it.
That's the most important thing. I agree with you. Go ahead, Laura.
And if we do this just because we don't want to be cut out of it, I feel like we're setting a precedence to be like, okay, we put the tables and the benches, they approved it. It's kind of like, if we're not happy with how this is being presented to us, I feel like we need to say what we really feel.
We
rather
will.
than-
No,
Okay.
that's being said. And we're also saying we want X, Y, and Z before you bring the next dollar amount
I
to us.
see. Okay.
All
And
right?
one last question is, somebody had shared that they were only going to purchase 8 tables rather than 16 tables. So is the 80,000 or 100,000 including all 16 tables and 19 benches? Or
Yes, with the initial goal to only purchase 8 of them and see how that goes, and then go from there. But I have to deal with a larger number because I'm getting what was recommended, and it still hasn't been vetted by the Board of Selectmen nor the Board of Finance. So we have to be a little bit larger in what we are. The only estimate I have is about $2,000 per bench. And quite honestly, one of my first questions that I asked Monica is, for $2,000, can't we have people just donate benches? And put their name on it in honor of Bill Smith for his years of service. Sorry, Bill. We could do that. And if somebody buys the bench as opposed to giving us money, that doesn't need our approval, but that's fine.
I love that
So
idea.
yeah, so even though we're approving, what the Board of Finance is also doing is proving the appropriation for that, so that if we get $30,000-$40,000 worth of donations to purchase benches, the town is authorized to make the expenditure to do that purchase. All right?
I see.
But yes, we're not just rolling over. We did you a favor this time.
Right, right.
Okay, thank you.
But to your point, Jack, like I feel like I don't know what the title of the Reed Hildebrand assignment is. I'd have to go back and look at it, but it feels to me like there are development consultants. Like you know what I mean? Like development. Well, we're gonna start by doing A and then we can do B and then why not C and D, right? So that I just feel like it's not like working back from a desired target state and then how do we get there? I feel like it's doing we'll do step 1, 2, and then over time 3 and 4. And I feel like I mean, aside from my personal opinion about the desired end state, then I feel like we're running the risk as an RTM finance committee of just signing up for an infinite list of projects for the next 5 years, right?
Well, I had
Not
somebody actually.
infinite, but I mean, you know
Yeah,
what I'm
no,
saying.
but I had somebody say to me, the GAIC was supposed to be recommending, but
Yes,
you have all these things, and and I said, oh, so that's their Christmas list, and
yes, exactly,
mommy and daddy are supposed to
exactly,
just approve it.
exactly.
And I agree. Took me a while, but let me restate, I think, Charles, what you're saying. What you're saying is, and I'm going to pick a year, just take in 5 years. In 5 years, we want Great Island to have X, Y, and Z. And so the way we're going to get there is in year 1, we're going to do X. In year 2, we're going to do Y. And in year 3, 4, and 5, we're going to do Z. And I think that if I'm not mistaken, is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
All
May
right,
I?
go ahead.
I concur with Charles, and I think it's everyone. Again, it's like these ideas being put out, like, and they're like, "Isn't it nice?" Well, of course it's nice, but we could end up with an end result which we're not where we want to go but nobody wants to make any decisions. It's almost like we're being told, "Well, we're not going to worry about the long term right now,"
Exactly.
and I don't like that. I think we should have a plan that's going to be the long term. Like just for example, I mean, I'll be brutally candid and honest. I think it should be primarily a park, a place to go, a park, not a place, but that's more developed. I think the concept of developing the island is wrong. We bought it. It's, and I think we should make a decision. Do we want a park? Do we want a concert venue? Do we want, what do we want to look at? I think those are the plans that need to be decided now, and then make and then commit to the plan over a course of X number of years, and we go through it. And I just, I'm on the same page with Charles completely.
I have just one change of word for you, Peter. I do not want it to be a park because then it goes under the Park and Rec Commission and we have absolutely no say on what's going on.
True.
What we want it to be is open space with conservation.
Well,
Is that
okay? That's an important difference. It's not just semantics. I understand those terms have legal consequences, and I agree with that.
Yeah, I know you did. That's why I'm saying
Thank you.
we want it to be open space with conservation and not as developed as what we seem to be hearing. Go ahead, Doug.
I feel like weighing in here. Seems like we're giving them a blank check for $100,000 for 19 tables and up to 16 chairs, 19 benches and 16 tables and chairs. It's almost like we're saying God will provide, and Jack Davis and the finance committee is God. We're giving them too much. I think if they want $80,000, only give them $80,000 worth of authority. I don't
know what the final number is. That's why we're going to 100.
Are
Number one. Wait. Number one, Doug. Number two, we're going to be extremely specific in what the resolution says they can and cannot do with that money.
I don't disagree with you or anything that's been said here tonight. I mean, I rather than a 3-year plan, a 5-year plan, I think they should have a 10 or 15-year plan for the use of this park. I mean, I like what they did in Cary, North Carolina for a communal park. And I don't know that anyone in our town has looked at what they did down there, but I think it's one of the best parks I've seen anywhere in my life. The other comment I have is that, are we going out for bids? I mean, $2,000 doesn't sound like a lot, maybe for a bench, or people might donate these benches in the end. And we certainly need some benches out there and some tables, because I went out there and I thought, oh my God, this is a money pit. I mean, the trees haven't been trimmed in 20 years. The arborist's cost to just make this place look like a park or look like an aesthetic estate again is going to be ginormous, because it's so poorly maintained for so long. I mean, I just can't see the vision yet. I mean, it's, unless they put gambling on it or something that raises a lot of revenue, I don't know how they're ever going to fund what they think they're going to do.
There's several things that we have an advantage of. Number one, we're our own arborists. So we have staff that does things. And I agree that we're not giving them a blank check. We're being very specific, and we're giving them a warning how things have to come back to us the next time out. And I think both of those are important aspects to what we're saying. Initially,
I think I saw one bench or one place to sit on the way in and out, and
yeah, we know what benches cost
going in and out of that place right now.
And we know what benches cost because we've done it before. So, I even knew that estimate was around the right estimate. So, other than bench tariffs that might have come on, that's going to be the rough thing for the metal benches with some boards and other things there.
Until they get parking, do they really want to attract that many visitors? Because it's really dangerous getting from Pear Tree Beach to that island, and that walkway it's treacherous. I feel sorry for anyone who has to drive that on a regular basis.
Well, yeah.
Well, I will say that, like, the long walk from Pear Tree Point Beach would perhaps say that there should be some benches available once you get there, because it's a hike and a half.
Yeah.
And older people, I saw them like just sitting down on the side of the road and taking a breather. And I myself sat behind the mansion, and you can't even sit on the steps. The steps are crumbling. So I mean, I just don't. There's no place to sit really. If you can find a rock, maybe.
And that's why. Go ahead.
What I wanted to say is, obviously, like, people in town say, listen, we spent $80 million to buy this island, right? So when do we start getting some benefit from the money that we spent or bonded? So I understand that people say, listen, could we have some benches and chairs and tables and start to get use from it? And can we take our dogs there? I mean, I feel like making it accessible to the population, the town is completely appropriate, but I think there needs to be a top-down framework guiding how and when that occurs. That's as opposed to purely incremental.
Jack,
Wait, give me 1 second. I'm trying to see if Amy Zavatakis wants to join us. What's the telephone number to join? Hold on.
And they're going to add benches and chairs eventually anyway, right? So
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Like Beth said, right? We need, benches and chairs are going to get used one way or the other. So this is sort of a no regrets move as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
But-
I mean, the
In
Great
a
Island-
meeting. Sorry, I'm
and
telling
no
you.
worries.
they're going to do it. They're going to do it without us anyway because they got
No
the
worries.
votes.
Yeah, I mean, and hopefully the sooner the better. So maybe we can. I don't even know what the timing is on these benches and tables. Is it for the summertime? Can they get them in?
Yeah, that's what they're
That's
looking
my
to do.
understanding. Yeah.
and I
Okay,
guess
great.
to Doug's point, I agree with like, it seems like an awful lot of money for, benches and tables, but I get it. If Jack is saying that we've done this before, we're not going to overpay for a bench and a table, then I trust that.
Yeah, it's also who I spoke to and my working with her in the past to know that the moniker is, I'm try and put it as nicely as I can. Monica's as cheap as I am. So she's not going to be overspending on this aspect of what's going on.
I'd love to hear that. That's great.
Yeah, so and we've done the benches, so we know what those are. I wasn't, I heard that they were going around the stable, and I didn't quite understand. So Charles, I appreciate you providing the additional information, and that makes sense too. My thing is that especially with various age groups and other things, just walking on the paths and that, having a place to sit down, as you mentioned, Doug, and Beth, as you actually mentioned, just getting there is like, I've done my steps just to get there. It makes sense to have places where people can sit and rest for a bit. So I just invited Amy Zavatakis to come to our meeting. Her meeting is done. But let's keep on talking because I'm going to make mention to Monica that she should listen to this. Go ahead, Michael. Somehow you're muted.
Oh.
You're better now.
Yeah.
Try again. Okay.
Yeah. So with the plans for Great Island, I'm assuming the surveys were taken into account. And is that the vision that we're gonna be in line with how the town folks of Darien responded with what they want to do with Great Island?
I will say simply that the surveys were taken into account. And that's what I'll say on surveys. I have some reservation on surveys because number one, it only reflects the people that respond to it.
Yeah, for sure. I understand.
And
Yeah.
number two, not everything that's requested is even doable. So, there still has to be a balance from some of the presentations I've gone to. Be honest, I go into some of the parts of the meetings because Channel 79 lists where certain things are discussed, and I go to those parts because I don't have the bandwidth for, actually, Charles, I heard it was a 3-hour, 24-minute meeting. To sit there for 3 hours and 24 minutes on a PC and listen to half of the stuff that I really am not interested in. So first of all, kudos to you, and I know Adele Conniff was there for that. God bless you for doing that. So yes, they're taken into account. So, but
I mean, it's just in response to what Beth said that, there's a lot of, people in town who are like voicing concerns with what we're going to do with Great Island.
Correct.
So I just want to make sure that,
Yep.
and
we're
I think we're
responding
hearing,
to,
I think we're hearing more and more on the conservation side,
yeah, correct.
which is what Peter had mentioned and what several of us have mentioned, that, and I have a slightly different approach. I don't mind if we just have a 5-year plan right now, because I remember at work they used to have me forecast 3 to 5 years out. And when I was right, I took that forecast out and said, you see, I was right.
Mhm.
And half the time I was happy that it stayed buried in the desk. Because what happens 5 years from now, who knows? But even if we did a 5-year forecast and start from where we want to be in 5 years and then go from there, that I agree with what Charles is saying. And some of the other things that they do may be in year 5 through 10, but we don't know what that is, and we don't know what's happening there. And, this committee actually told Monica, I don't know, from those of you who were still on at that time, Monica one time said when she was first selectman that there were like 4 blank canvases on Great Island. And F&B told her that the wilderness area, we preferred that stayed blank, that they did nothing to it. And so, that's just sort of an approach that we have. And I think that it's gaining some steam that I'm not sure that everybody wants to see a lot of development there.
So I have a question. Does Reed Hildebrandt have a long-term incentive to promote development of the property? Like is there a possibility that they say, great, well, we do phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're going to be getting project management fees and development
Right
coordination
now,
fees and vendor coordination for. I mean, I guess my hypothesis is it feels to me, listening to the meetings, that they actually have a long-term incentive to promote development for the foreseeable future, step by step.
Like a
That was my
conflict,
take listening to the meeting.
like a conflict of interest. Even it's a presumption, probably, right, that they do.
no, they don't. They have a limited.
Contractually, it's an advisory, but the way they're talking, they're saying, oh yeah, well then phase 3. I mean, there was even somebody I listened. There was even somebody that said, why is it there are all these white lines all over the property? And somebody said, well, those are the walking paths to get to the concert pavilion once we decide to build it. And then there's a playground, and then there's access paths to the playground.
I made comments on that playground.
What's
That
that?
rules, I talked about the playground saying.
Yeah, so anyway, so my whole point is they're just presenting it as layers development that will go on over time without limit. I mean,
Well,
they must
they're
just
supposed
they must just pave the thing just pave it over.
Right. So Reed Hildebrandt was hired to do phase 1 and 2. That's it. Phase 3 and 4, which actually does include construction costs and other things like that, has to go out for bid again. I'm not getting. I know that Amy talked about this at her meeting, so I don't want to put somebody on the spot, but can you reiterate what happened at your meeting to our meeting? This is Cindy Torres.
Hey guys, I just got back from our meeting. We had Monica join. I would say it's worthwhile to watch her meeting. It was pretty short. But she addressed a lot of concerns because I guess there were people that had written into the Darien Times and just a lot of like the concern of like, are we going to be overdeveloping Great Island, etc. And she really emphasized that like right now they're just working on like immediate early access, which is just getting some parking spots in and getting some minimum pathways on the island. They do, yeah, Monica said this. I mean, some of what she said is that in some of like the visuals, it may look like they're doing too many paths. So that was brought up. And it was kind of said that maybe it does look deceiving, and they talked about like near the Eagle's Nest, things like that. But I recommend watching that meeting because she talked a lot about it and we asked her a lot of questions. But she just really said, like, look, nothing is going to happen fast. We are having all options out there, full menu, and we're going to be eliminating things, but everything's out there, and then nothing's going to move fast. Like we're not going to we're not going to go and find that all this development is happening really quick overnight. So she did kind of, yeah, or at all. But she, so I would recommend watching the meeting.
Well, I mean, that sounds interesting, but that's kind of inconsistent with the concept of phase 3. If there's a phase 3 that's being envisioned, that sounds like, again, like I think what Charles and I are concerned about.
Yeah, like they said, like Jack kind of mentioned it too, like there's going to be like a long-term plan of like 5, 10, what's the future 15 years from now, but I don't think that they've really gotten to that part yet. They're just trying to get through this first part. They want access for people, and that's again, she said like nothing's going to move fast. So
Did anybody say anything about taking down a wall, like an ocean wall?
It was discussed
Oh, yeah.
at the committee. It was discussed at the.
It was discussed at the Saturday. Charles, was there a subsequent meeting after that? Several weeks ago was a Saturday.
No, there was a Great Island Advisory Committee meeting. When was it? It was the 3-hour thing that Jack was referring to.
Right. No, okay.
When was it? Last week sometime, I forget.
But they presented over the weekend several weeks ago, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And I was like, what? Like, it wasn't even appropriate for me to even speak up because they weren't entertaining questions. And I'm like, why are you taking down? And they're like, well, we're not really entertaining questions, but it's better access for boats. I'm like, that's not a reason to take a wall down. So that was concerning and alarming.
Like a retaining wall?
Yes.
Yeah, that got brought up, but we really didn't go into.
There's a discussion of the removal of I forget the purpose of removing the retaining wall, but I mean, to my mind, we're confusing the issue of speed with the confusion of end state, right? Like, are we gonna go 500 miles down the path and completely develop it, except for a few protected areas, right? So that means we're going a long distance, or are we going to only do 20% development, whatever that, you know what I'm saying, right? So once you get a target state, then there's a second question of at what pace do you intend. So the fact that we intend to do it slowly means that we're being silent. We're talking about the speed, not about the target end state. And I feel we should. And I'm not saying I think it's obviously good to not rush things, but we need to get like, for example, we got the mansion, right? People are talking about an event space and wedding space, and we're going to rebuild it, and then we had people talking about room for parking trucks, so we can get catering to serve the events going on in the mansion, or whatever. So that just tells me that the people are leaving open the fact that we're going to have a very high degree of development as opposed to a very limited degree of development, and that to my mind is different from whether we go fast or slow to get to the target state.
Yeah, I mean, to touch on the two things you just said. She said the parking is 65 spaces, I believe, something like that, 60 something. And then the overflow was like 50. So it's like a total of like 110 parking spaces. Monica did say she's gotten, people that have reached out that have said like, hey, like, yeah, we want to have a wedding here and this and that. And she did say like, look, like, if that's something that we're going to do, we have to make a policy on it. So she did say they're talking about what are the policies, what are the guidelines, if that is the direction we're going in. But she's saying that she's hearing from other people, they don't want that. So I don't think, based upon what Monica shared with us at this meeting, that they're not hearing people's concerns about the talk of development.
There's one other thing I wanted to go on all this about. And Charles, you remind me of a story about that when I was in college, I went on a flight. I was driving a Volkswagen, so when they took off, I wasn't used to the G's of that plane taking off. And the pilot got on about 2 hours into the flight and said, we have some good news and bad news. The good news is we have a tailwind and we're doing 700 miles an hour. And so we're thinking that we're going to get there early. What could possibly be the bad news? And the pilot goes, the bad news is we're lost. So the fact of the matter is that I will tell you that Mark Adeletta will be discussing this at the next RTM meeting to talk about what is decided, what's not decided, and what the process is. But I do want to deal with two things, and this is part of what I will then say, should this be moving forward on the tables and chairs. I would like to do the tables and chairs simply because it's part of the access. It makes it a little bit more comfortable. We'll tie their hands up. Believe me, I'm really good at writing resolutions that tie the bejeebies out of them. So, and I'll work with Wayne to make sure that we're doing it.
I feel a lot more comfortable about the tables and chairs.
So the question is, do we need a vote tonight on the tables and chairs?
I would like to have a sense of the meeting since we don't have a formal resolution and it wasn't on my agenda and it's a special meeting, but I did have on our meeting what's coming down the road, and it turns out that what happened on the road happened today. So I did have it on the special meeting.
One thing that was also
And so are you looking for a motion?
Yeah, we will, but yeah, just finish what you had to say. Oh, that, yeah, we know that, right. But that only reimburses our money. So what I'm looking to do is have a sense of the meeting on what I'm going to say is the motion so that I can then report to the RTM, should this come before us, which will substantially be the motion I'm talking about now, so that we can approve that. But I also want to have in our report some of the things that we're looking for. And I think one of the first things we're looking for is we want to know what the exact process is on spending any incremental dollars on Great Island that are not included in the original bond that was for access, parking, and remediation. So what's the process going to be? I want to know that it includes the RTM, even for minor $10,000 items. Don't care. That this is, we're going to be involved. Number two, and I think what Charles says, we want to know what the end game is in 5 years. So we know what that vision is. And then when you're coming back to us for something in 26 or something in 27 or something in 28, that we know that it's fitting into that 5-year vision. That's what we want. And if you can only give us 3 years, then tell us what the 3 years is. So we understand what the funds, what you're looking for the vision. don't need what the money is yet, because you may not know what the money to do these things are. But at least go and tell us, this is what your vision of where we should be in 3 years, period.
And
Come from that.
who said whether we want 20% of the island developed or no development at all? I think that we need, if we have
That's part of their 3 to 5 year. That's what I expect to come from there.
okay.
Okay. So it's a vision. This is what we think we're going to do. I mean, I hate to say it, but this is basic business 101. I mean, you don't come into I wouldn't have dared gone into the executive vice president and said, well, I have these 27 things I'm doing. And I would have been kicked out of the 6th floor of Chase building and landed very hardly on my tush. And I made sure that wasn't going to happen. So go ahead, Doug.
I would kind of like to know a consensus of this committee on what they think of this island someday being used as a wedding venue, because Monica said that she liked that idea.
That's not within that's not something I want to bring up at this time. It's outside of the purview of what we're looking at.
But do you have an opinion on that yourself? I mean, I personally
No,
think
I don't have an opinion
idea.
on, oh, wait, I'm going to allow, I just have Amy joining us. Hold on. Amy, is that you?
It seems like
It
a,
is,
yes.
Seems like a natural moneymaker for the island.
Well, again, that's something that's outside of what we're discussing now. So Amy, I'm going to bring you up to date on some of the things that we've been discussing.
Okay.
One of the things that was raised is this committee doesn't want to see a bunch of charts and a wish list, a sort of Christmas list that mommy and daddy has to buy for the kiddos. What we want to understand is what do you think this place should be in 3 years? What's your vision? Solid. What's your vision in 5 years? Then we kind of know where you're going for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, and year 5. So we want to know that, as opposed to makeshift 27 options, white paths, blue paths, yellow paths, whether or not we're doing weddings, whether or not we're fixing the mansion. So that's something we're going to be asking for. Number 2, we want to know what the exact protocol is going to be, something that you and I talked about, that this goes from the advisory committee to the Board of Finance, to the Board of Selectmen, to the Board of Finance, and the RTM for all expenses and projects that is not included under the original bonding that was for access, parking, and remediation. Number 3, we want to see a budget. This item had been discussed for a long time, and probably if they threw $100,000 in for it in the capital account, even though it would have raised our taxes by 1 basis point, it would have just gone through, and we're not playing the game that we're doing now. We are in favor, because their goal is, and we're going to take a sense of the meeting on that, we understand that their initial goal is access to have benches there, which one of our members actually suggested you need at least 1 or 2 benches just walking from Pear Tree to get to the island, to sit down once you're there. But to have benches is consistent with just being good to the people that are going to be there, and having the tables in and around the stable isn't a bad idea, since that's a gathering place. And if they subsequently have a truck or coffee or a pop-up cafe, or if nothing else, it allows people that bring lunches or other things to sit down and congregate and just be there, and they can see how well it's being used.
It seemed like a shady place to me there too.
Yeah, it is. And
So,
right now it has
good.
bathrooms, which no place else has, really, a couple pop-ups. But go ahead, Amy.
so
go
I
ahead.
would, so I guess I would recommend to folks to watch the PZ&H meeting that we just completed a little while ago. If you have time to, you can watch it on double speed. So it was only an hour though. I feel like I really tried to ask Monica to give us a roadmap of what is expected to be needed as far as approvals, sort of in line with what you just said, Jack. And it was really, here is going to be part one, which is this access parking area and some bathrooms. Part two was going to start being pathways and what funding is needed to sort of shore up the buildings that are going to be retained on the property. And it does, the plan is definitely to have a budget and a plan that goes through all of the appropriate steps. I do think this whole bench seating area thing has kind of come up a little bit out of, I don't know, left field is not the right word because it has been talked about a lot. One of the other things, though, as far as timing, is that they're going to start the work on 23A in the next couple weeks, and basically it's going to take all summer. So the island won't be open during the week to town residents for pretty much the summer. During weekdays, will be open on the weekends. So, that sort of impacts how many people are going to be coming onto the island in terms of anyone needing to sit there. So that's, the sense of the meeting from PZ&H was, yes, it's a nice idea to start having some places to sit, but people were concerned about wanting to know what the prices were and whether there was a plan, for example, to have town residents do donations as memorial benches. So I'm not sure we were all, I'm not really sure I can say that my committee was as crazy about the idea of giving a sense of approval at this time.
Well, we haven't voted yet, so I don't know how the committee is there.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
I think that we're, I don't want to speak for the committee, but I think everything you said the committee has discussed here. Prior to you joining, I lassoed Cindy to give some of the updates from your meeting to us at the same time I was asking you to join us. But yes, I just want to be prepared because as I said, my biggest concern is that I still have an email into Jen Chinesky where I believe that I'll get a response over the weekend to see whether or not this can't be deferred to September.
Well, I think that's kind of why I mentioned that there really isn't going to be that much access to Great Island all summer based on the timing of the 23A work.
Yeah, I just don't want it to be that we're sort of told that and it gets to the Board of Finance and they say, oh, the RTM isn't reacting. I have money for it. I can do it. I don't need their approval. Because
that'll be a bad thing.
That would be a very bad thing. Because it may mean that the next thing they bring to the RTM, we don't address on the timely basis they want it to be addressed.
Amy, what is 23A?
That's
23A is the, no, that's not right. 23A is the road from, from the entrance pillars to the circle. So that's the piece of parcel, that's the piece of property that they want to expand the road on, add a sidewalk. And it was the start of that was supposed to have happened already, but the start was delayed because they have to take down a number of trees and a lawsuit was filed to stop the removal of the trees. That case, there were 2 cases filed, both have been dismissed. The appeal period has run on any appeal of the decisions in those cases. So the town's now clear to start on that work. And that is covered, the cost of that is covered by the purchase and access that has already been approved.
Right. And we talked a little bit about that because the tenant who is upping their lease is aware that that road isn't going to have access during the week.
Yeah, there will be access for them to get in and out and for emergency vehicles to get in and out, but it's going to be closed. Basically Great Island, once they start this work, will be closed to town residents other than the tenant every weekday from 7, well, every weekday, because the work will be happening from 7 to 4. And that So the island will be closed every weekday. It'll be open on the weekends only.
How
And
many,
once that work's done, they're gonna want to have the benches in place. I would assume they're gonna do it while it's closed.
Maybe, because the next step after that, which will come, see, the next step that will come to the RTM is the first stage of the early access, which is putting in some parking places near what's referred to as the greenhouse, which is the house that the lease is being extended on. They're going to be putting in a sort of a one-way loop, some parking places, and they're also going to be putting some bathrooms in the root cellar that's adjacent to that building. That's the step. That's sort of the 1A, as she referred to it. That the work to do that will come before, go through the process of Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and RTM.
Well, so if they're doing parking though, wasn't parking part of the bonding? I think the work on the bathrooms and everything like that has to come to the RTM, but the actual parking
Jack,
itself may not.
If they're saying they're gonna bring this before everybody, I'm not gonna argue that they shouldn't.
No, I agree. I agree. We still have $4 million there that I'd like to get rescinded.
Right, but as of right now, so to me, again, I think that the benches could be part of 1A. But I'm not really sure I understand the rush to put them in. This is me personally speaking, this is not my committee.
So no, that's fine. But that's part of the reason why we're making a lot of things contingent. And I just want to have it in our back pocket and speak to Jen Chinesky first, and then I'll speak to Jay-Z to see what he's thinking.
can I ask how many trees are coming down and there was no way to like work around the trees? Like those are really huge mature trees.
No.
15 trees, and Laura, it was heavily litigated.
Okay. I'm a tree hugger.
I mean,
so...
I know I would
right.
have, there are many of us that would love to have saved them, and they are going to replant quite a bit in that area, but it was very heavily discussed.
Got it.
So any other questions, and can we take a sense of the meeting of whether or not we're in favor of putting in benches and tables and chairs in the stable area? And so
the benches are, just so we're clear, the benches are not in the stable area. The benches are all over the island.
No, benches I know around, but the tables and chairs are in the stable area. So all those in favor? Okay, those, that's unanimous. I don't have to go. So that's just so we have it in our back pocket. I don't know that this is coming forward. My goal will be to delay this until September, which then we have some better information on. But I do.
Jack, if there's going to be de minimis or no public access for most of the summer, I don't understand why we have to do this now. I mean, I think it was good that we did the sense of the meeting, but are we going to be buying these benches so they sit in crates until September?
So Peter, this is why. I'm telling you why. If this is nothing more than a tactical move, all right? Because without a stated process of what needs to be done, which there is not, all right? This could easily be adopted by the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance in July, with the understanding that they want it done. They may have to put in an order in order to get it for September when the work is going to be done, and they want to put it in beforehand, all right? And since the RTM is not meeting, they're going to take it out of funds that the Board of Finance has full control of and cut us out of this decision. And that's a bad decision to make, a very bad decision.
We know.
And so I want to make sure that we can at least address what we feel And if we bring it on Monday and it gets voted down, they understand that there needs to be more information that needs to be brought back to us. If it's voted up, we're allowing them to use what funds based upon some better finance numbers that will be available for them in July. But we're also putting some things on the table saying, this is what we expect to have before you bring anything else back to us.
I agree. I concur.
So, and that's why one of the frustrations I've heard from both residents and members of the RTM is that they feel that they don't have a say. All right. Now, without questions, we control the purse strings, and there's going to be some purse strings we're going to have to decide. I think that having this and writing a report, which I'll try and send around to everyone, allows us to put the conditions to them up front to say, here's what we expect. And don't bring things forward if you can't do this for us. And so, that still doesn't mean they're not going to, but at least we are trying to provide them with a voice from the RTM of what we want and what we hope to see. And I do think you almost start with, some of the things that Charles says. Don't tell me 27 options and paths going all over the place as if you were trying to get out of a, line. How do you get from point A to the end and exit on a corn maze? Tell me, this is what we want. And here's what we intend to do. Now, they may know 1A. They may actually have an idea of 1B. But at some time, we don't want to be piecemealed. We want to hear what the vision is, and then where 1A, 1B, 2, and 3 are in it. And I think that's what we're looking at. They may not be ready for that at this time. I know.
I think that's a way to help prevent mission creep. And that's what I'm afraid, mission creep.
Yeah.
And I guess, and that's why I guess I would encourage you to watch the discussion that we had at PZ&H, because I really tried to zoom in on what are exactly the next steps. And I don't think we're going to know the vision 3 years from now, because I think there are too many decisions still to be made. But I think if we can narrow in on the 1A and 1B, at least we can focus in on those 2 points and make sure that we get all the detail that we need. And I think I do think that's where they're trying to get to. Whether they will or not, I don't know, but that's the goal.
Thank you.
So, thank you, Amy. Is there anything else to say, or?
I have one quick question, Amy. Is there been a discussion on the percentage of development that everyone feels comfortable with? Because nobody's really, it's one thing to say a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan or a 1-year plan, but it's like, I think somebody else brought this up. I don't know if it was Charles or Doug, but it's kind of like, what do we feel comfortable with in terms of development? And another point.
Exactly, Laura.
And another point is, do we need, people are not comfortable with weddings, and, it might preclude people from coming and accessing the island if a wedding is going on. But do we need a revenue source? Do we have, what do we have that's generating revenue? And what do we feel comfortable with that could generate revenue?
So let me answer those two separately. So as far as development, there's very little development in where they are right now. Where I think I personally got a little uncomfortable was the extent to which it seemed like they were paving paths. Exactly. And there is a percentage, and I don't have that percentage, of which, because this is a new public property that's going to be opened, a certain percentage of the property does have to be ADA accessible. So that's what they're working on. But what's shown on a lot of those maps as paths, not all of that is going to be paved, which is what I thought when I first saw it personally.
That's what I
So
thought too.
that's as far as the percentage of development, there's not a lot, but there is a certain percentage that we have to meet as far as ADA accessible walkways.
Okay.
As far as the events, et cetera, that was one thing that Monica said, is they are currently working on sort of the policies for the island, and they want input right now on, do people think that we should have large events? Do we think we shouldn't have large events, so that they can start writing those policies? So if someone comes forward and wants to rent the island for an event, we have something in place to know whether or not we can say yes or no. So that's what they are working on right now, and they are looking for feedback on.
Yeah.
So I want to add something else.
But Amy, if I could just make a comment like that, that strikes me as like a very kind of, it's like a transactional approach, right? Upon what basis will individual events be approved or not, right? To my mind, the question is, the level of development of the property today is, I'll pick a number, 15%, let's say. I don't know if that's the right number. Let's say it's 15% today, right? Are we going to go to 25? Are we going to go to 60? Listen, if people say, yes, we want to have the ability to host a 250-person wedding and a corporate retreat and whatever, then we better keep the mansion. We better have $10 million in the budget to rebuild or refurbish the mansion over the next 5 years, and then we're going to need parking lots for the event tent. Do you know what I'm saying, right? So I think we got to be clear about where are we setting the dial, you know, and once we get clarity on what the end state is, then we can talk about the individual steps and or policies along that path. But I feel like we're talking the whole time about path and process and steps, right? So we're just like, we're taking the whole thing like incremental, inch by inch by inch, as opposed to saying, like, what's the target state 4 years from now, and get people to buy. And like you said, Laura, right? Like, okay, well, obviously the good news is if we did rebuild the mansion and we spend $10 million to do that, then we could have an event and make 200 grand on the event. So that'd be like a high development, high income version of the property. You know, the other version would be we do what we have today plus what's necessary for ADA plus to increase usage, and then it's a 20% usage factor, and then we get greater environmental benefit but a lot less dollars into the town budget. And I almost feel like we need to say these are the sort of the two extremes, and where's the town coming out?
I do want to add something else, which is an interesting concept that was actually brought up in one of the meetings that I attended early on with Great Island, and had a conversation with Reed Hildebrand. Just assuming that our debt service on this is someplace, because we're doing it over 30 years, is about $4 million a year. On the financials that we did, whether or not the town could afford this island, just the purchase of the island, with some minimal development, the model that I did and Jenny assisted on put $20 to $25 million worth of investments in years 3, 4, 5, and 6. Revenue was not considered at any time as being necessary to purchase this island.
Wow.
It was never considered. And so the reason why it's now being considered is something new. And it's not necessarily something that needs to be done.
Interesting.
All right. And believe it or not, even though there was a small cabal that figured out the finances, you know, for those who were there, I know Peter, you were there, Beth, Bill, and several of the others. On the night that the RTM approved, I presented the model that Jenny and I had created to see what the effects were and what the costs were. And we did a rather sophisticated model because we took every capital planned event and calculated out what the bonding would be for those going out 5, 6 years. And by the way, we did miss some and other things like that. We also calculated out what the operating budgets would be, and boy, did we miss those. But we actually were then able to figure out and then go, if your house is in this evaluation, here's what the effect on your taxes are going to be. And so we did a real in-depth model, adding things in that were not in the town model that they presented. And I'll say it quite openly here. What Jenny and I felt is that we got a back of the envelope model that, quite honestly, had that model come to my business unit by one of my staff, it would have been thrown in the waste paper basket, expressed as being a train wreck, and they would have sat around my round table to explain this is how you do a 5-year pro forma statement, which they did not do. All right, we did it. And I'll be yelled at for saying that publicly. I was chastised on that during the time that I said that publicly, but we did not get a 5-year pro forma that we could look at when we requested it. So we sat down and did our own. Even with that, there was no revenue anticipated. Doug.
I think the idea of revenue now is not being driven by anything other than people requesting to have weddings there and demand from the public to want to rent the property for events. And so I'm not sure it was ever something that people perceived as, but it's popular. I mean, just like the DCA has policies in place for renting that building on Middlesex.
I understand, but Doug, and I don't want to go too far down that path. The fact of the matter is that's something that has to be decided on. But I think that needs to be decided on not just by the Board of Selectmen. That's something that may need to have RTM approval. And I would say this is a major decision that you're making. And because the investment in, and Charles, you were generous with $10 million, having been at the bottom of that and knowing what the electrical is and knowing what the kitchens are and knowing what the room sizes are, I don't see that being a winning venue.
Yeah, I don't.
I've been in old mansions.
I'm not saying the building, but they're talking about a permanent.
No, I understand. But I'm just saying, I don't want to go into that because that's not the point. The point here is we didn't anticipate it. If they do, that's a change in policy, and that change of policy should be discussed not just amongst the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. That deserves.
And not just the advisory committee either. You're thinking it.
Well, that's the one who just starts it. So, but yes, I heard at one of the Reed Hildebrand, well, gee, can you find $5 million? Yes, I can find $5 million. We can open the largest Chuck E. Cheese in the world and doing that. So, I mean, there's a lot of things are set up, as you said, a casino. So, I mean, yeah, there's things that we could generate that type of money. Is that what we want? So that's what I'm saying. That decision is going to go out further. But if that's something they're looking at, that should be part of what Charles said is the 3 to 5 year plan. We intend to eventually be able to hold events here. That's all they need to say. They don't even need to say where, how, or anything else, or this is the course.
As far as conservation goes, going out there, I mean, the number I just heard was something like 60% development. I don't even think that's possible. I mean, if they're going to put a lot of this property into conservation, I mean, I can't imagine it ever getting more than 25% developed myself.
Well, I'm not going to get onto that, but again, I think part of the limitations that are there is that you don't have the current sewer capabilities, you don't have the current water capabilities, you don't have the infrastructure necessary, including some of the parts that it's wetlands, including the part that it's close to the shore, so you have to worry about that. So there's a lot of issues that would need to be addressed prior to their making that final decision. So I'm just saying, if they believe, all I need to hear, again, because this is a 5-year plan, potentially, or even the 3-year, by year 3, we would be considering having events. Done. That's all.
And
And you don't have to give the details. Go ahead,
based
Amy.
on the last Great Island Committee meeting, which I watched, if there were any events, it would be all outside of the buildings. There's the only intention as far as the buildings that will be in, and this would be sort of the 1B, is shoring up the buildings that are marked to be kept so that they don't get worse or fall down, but not to start working on actually doing anything where we would be inside them.
Yeah,
Except maybe the stadium.
But
yeah,
as an example, Amy, there was an explicit mention of a permanent event tent, whatever that is.
Yeah,
Next to
that's
the
gone.
mansion. There was an
that's gone.
explicit mention of a parking space next to the mansion so that people could get to the permanent event tent.
well, Amy just said
permanent
that's
event
gone.
tent. The permanent event tent was they decided not to include in the master plan.
Does that mean they would conceivably have temporary event tents or seasonal event tents or?
You're asking questions they haven't decided on.
Yeah.
So
And there was a whole
anyhow,
discussion about pavilions on the back of the mansion.
I would suggest 2 things, and then I know this is a great conversation, but the Yankees are about an hour and a half into their game after the Mets blew one this afternoon. So what I would say is definitely watch Amy's meeting. It should be up tomorrow morning early, and it's much shorter than ours. Also, if you're having difficulty going to sleep, you can watch the 3 hours and 20-minute last meeting. I find watching channels 79 sometimes is the best way to fall asleep. So, but definitely take a look. There is a highlight that goes on it that says what's discussed at various times. So you can then go to those areas. But with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. I have Bill Dunn and I'll take Peter Orfanos. I want to thank you all. This was a really good conversation. Amy, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Always a pleasure because you bring a wealth of knowledge that we don't have. So I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Happy to help. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
Good night.
Thanks a lot,
Bye.
guys.
Good night.
Night, everyone.
Good night.